Sorry about that. Had to take a phone call. And getting back to the lecture, um, we were talking about getting information about your programs of interest. How many? Probably a good number, somewhere around 8, usually between 6 and 12. And uh, nowadays you can get information online, but you may also want to look to contact the programs of interest. Particularly if you have specific questions, you may want to contact usually there's a clinical director or a graduate coordinator or program director or something along those lines for admissions coordinator for the programs of interest. So you're going to want to look to contact them if you have any questions. Additionally, it's also a good way to, in some ways, get to know the program and also kind of plant your name as someone for them to remember. So, additionally, you also want to ask them about financial aid. We talked a little bit about this earlier in the semester, but at the PhD level, most people get funded, and that means that you'll get either a stipend, a certain amount of money, or tuition remission, or both. But very often that might not cover everything. If you're applying for a PsyD program or a master's program, you may not get funding at all. In fact, it's probably more likely than not that you won't get funding. In any case, you should ask about financial aid information, and they may very often forward you on to the financial aid office or officers. But getting a sense of what kind of scholarships might be available or fellowships, or what kind of funding opportunities might be available in their department. Very often, the primary two mechanisms for funding in a graduate program are teaching or research. And so either you can be part of a professor's research team and get funded that way, or you may be able to be a teaching assistant, or if you come in with a master's degree, sometimes you can teach your own courses. So in any case, get information from your programs of interest over the summer, between your junior and senior year, if you're going kind of in a regular kind of 4-year setup. Number 2, review program materials as they arrive. If you're particularly organized, it's a good idea to create a file for each of the programs of interest that you have. And that can be the things that you like about them and the things that you're not quite as fond about. You can look to highlight or underline or underscore, take notes on the things that really strike you, and that can be kind of opportunities that you might have in the program. It could also be research that certain professors are doing. So looking to focus on those things are good. What I would recommend doing is keeping a file for each of the programs to which you apply. Whether you do that electronically or with a hard copy doesn't really make a difference. But do that particularly after you send your cover letter, personal statement, personal essays, resume and all that kind of stuff, or vita to the program. Keep a hard copy file, because that way you can go back and look over the information if you get an interview. You can also look to follow up on learning about the professors there. So one of the things we talked about earlier in the semester is to look at the professors that are doing research at or teaching at your programs of interest. Try and get a sense of maybe 1 or 2 professors at each program that you would be interested in doing research with while you're at the program. And then that's the kind of thing you'd want to kind of indicate in your personal statement. Why you would like to do research with them, how your experiences might match up with the research that they're doing, and or how you could bring something to that research team. And after you apply, when you are being interviewed, if you get an interview with a program, you should expect that you're going to get follow-up questions on that. So in between the time that you apply and the interviews start to hopefully happen, what you should do is look at one or two recent articles for each of the professors that you may have mentioned in your application. So for example, if you were applying to the University of North Florida and you were interested in working with Dr. Fezak, well, you'd want to take a look at the last couple few articles that he's published, and you'd also want to look online to see if he has any kind of updated information as to areas of interest or research that he's currently conducting. And that way you can speak in relative knowledge about recent research articles and or interests that he has, which if you're going to get matched up with him for research, hopefully at the graduate level, it's good to know that you know what he's doing, and they like to see that. Again, it shows interest, it shows follow through, it shows preparation, and those are important things. After you get that information, start to choose the programs to which you're going to apply. Much earlier in the semester, we talked about trying to identify important variables or issues that are important for you. Now you can request information from as many programs as you want. You may want to only apply to 4 or 6 or 8 or however many you feel. Again, I recommend between 6 and 12. But really trying to identify the variables that are important to you, and that could be as simple as PhD versus masters. That could be region of the nation where they're located. It could be funding that's available. It could be what kind of jobs they prepare their students for. Some places do a very good job of preparing clinicians. Others do a very good job of preparing researchers, and some do a reasonably good job of doing both. I think I mentioned this earlier on, but one of the important things for me was climate, because I did not want to live anywhere where it snowed for 4 years, and so I only applied to places that were in. I think Stanford was the farthest north that I applied, and I also did not want to take the psychology GRE, and otherwise the GRE subject test for psychology. I had been out of college for 4 years, and I didn't really have the intent of going back and restudying areas of psychology that I wasn't particularly interested in following up on. So I didn't really want to go back and study physio or cognitive psychology, since I was going to go into counseling. But there are any host of variables, and so you need to figure out which ones are important to you and judge those programs on those criteria. Fourth thing, if needed, begin to prepare for the GRE subject test in that summer. Again, that depends on the programs to which you're applying, and it's almost exclusively for PhD programs and only some of them, so learn if you need to take it. Related to that, you should either continue your preparation for the GRE general test, or you should look to fire away and take it sometime over the summer. I usually recommend you take it once in the summer, if you can, and that way if you get a score that you're comfortable with, you're good to go. And if you don't, you still have ample time to study a bit more, maybe do something different, and if you didn't take a prep course the first time, you take one the second time. If you did the first time, you might look to take it again and focus on certain areas. But if you take it once during the summer and you don't get the score that you want, you still have ample time to take it again in the fall and before the deadlines come around. Most of the time, PhD deadlines are somewhere in December, and December or January. Master's programs are usually somewhere in kind of March to May, but you can get them in PhD programs as early as November. And so the last thing that you really want to do is wait until October to take it and then find out that you didn't do as well as you wanted, and then you have to scramble to put it together. So if you can take it once over the summer and then follow up in the beginning, the middle of the fall if you need to, then you're in pretty good shape. Don't forget to register for the GRE. You don't just show up. You have to register for it. It costs a certain amount of money. I don't know how much it is now. It's probably $150, $200, something like that, would be my guess. When you do that, you get 4 free score reports, and so what that means is you can get your score reported to 4 programs free of charge. Anything more than that will cost you, or classically is cost, I think it was 16 or 18 bucks last time I looked. So it could be as much as $20 per score report or more. So if you were to apply to 10 programs, the first 4 are free, the next 6 would cost an additional, let's say, $20 a pop, so that'd be another 120 bucks, not including all the other kind of charges that you incur for applying to graduate schools. Find out when you can take the GRE and where. There are a number of dates now. Before you could really only take it maybe about 6 times a year, 4 to 6 times a year. Now they have many more dates. And so find out where in Jacksonville you can take it and what the dates are. I imagine you can take it at UNF, but there may be other venues for you as well. Another thing to look to do is to start to either craft or refine, if you've already started, your kind of personal statement. And we'll talk about that. That's kind of the next thing, next topic we're going to cover. You also want to refine your resume since you're going to be starting it, or refine your Vita since you're going to be starting it now. Now both 6 and 7 in starting or personalizing your personal statement and or Vita resume are going to be applicable for graduate school as well as jobs. And again, as you're doing your resume or Vita, getting a sense of the areas that you might want to focus on before you graduate, so that you can get a little bit more experience and you can be more competitive, because that's really what you're looking to do, be competitive with your application materials. Let's see, it's the last little bit more. Senior year. By the end of October, if you have not already done so, usually I'd say probably nowadays, I'd say probably sometime before that, maybe beginning of October. Let's change that. By the beginning of October, approach professors regarding letters of recommendation. That's true about people outside of being professors as well, bosses or volunteer coordinators. You want to approach them about letters of recommendation. You want to take the GRE general test if you didn't already take it over the summer. By the beginning of October, you should take the GRE general test. You should also look to take the GRE subject test as soon as possible. You want to refine your personal statement and your Vita or resume, and you want to get feedback from professors and other people about your personal statement and your Vita or resume. Now again, I believe that professors that have experience in your area or do research in the area that you're going to pursue, if that's graduate school or jobs, are good people. You can also look to go to career services, the career services office, because they'll definitely do it for your Vita or resume, but they can also help with cover letters and personal statements and so on. By probably the end of October, it's a good idea to get the letter of recommendation forms to professors or other people. Now this is particularly pertinent, this is almost exclusively for, I should say, people applying to graduate school. Very often there are forms, beyond just the regular letter, there may be a form that the professor needs to fill out, or that your boss or volunteer coordinator, whomever you're looking to get letters of rec from, but there may be a form that your professor needs to fill out. And so make sure to get those to the professor or professors. I usually say by the end of October now, because if you want to give them a couple weeks to write the letter, and so really what you should do is look at what's the earliest date for your what's the earliest due date for a program. In other words, which program has the earliest due date for all your materials to be in. Have all your materials to all your sites by that date, in fact before, and then look to how else would I put this? Look to get the forms to your professor. Your professors probably a month before that, at least a few weeks before, because you want to give them ample time to write it, and you also want it to get there, because very often they want hard copies, they don't want them emailed. You want to have ample time for that information to get there. Now, a lot of them have started to go to online submission, and you can submit your letters of rec online, so it's not as big of a deal, but some don't. Some still do the old school snail mail way. And so you want to make sure to get that there to the professors in time for them to complete it, send it, and get it to the program in time. This is also a time frame whereby if you didn't take your first GRE General during the summer, and you took one in the fall and didn't like your score, you're going to want to take that second one probably sometime in November, because you want the score to get reported by the time of the deadline. Some programs will let second scores trickle in later. You have to have a score, but they'll let second scores trickle in later. Others won't. So you want to try and get everything in before that early deadline. So you want to make sure to get all your materials finalized for all your programs and in and submitted. I usually recommend you want to send that stuff out a week before the earliest deadline. Okay. Make sure that you get all your information in a week before the earliest deadline. That way you have time to make sure to call up the programs, make sure they got all the information. If they didn't, you still have time to maybe overnight, email, fax, whatever you need to do, get that information out to them. Make sure that you have a checklist of everything that you need to send. Now, usually you're going to have to send an application, some sort of vita or resume, your transcripts. Now, your transcripts are things that very often you're not going to be able to have in hand. They are often sent directly from the institution, but you have to request that, and that's another area where you might run up a bit of fees, because some programs, some universities or colleges or community colleges will actually charge you for copies of your transcript, or they may give you 2 free per month, and then it's going to cost you X amount per one after that. That's information to get early on, but to recognize that that may be another fee for you, that may be another charge that goes against you. Don't forget to send your application fee, because no matter how stellar of as a candidate you may feel that you are, if you're not sending in your application fee, you're out of luck. Now, classically, if you applied to a state college in the state of Florida, once you applied to one, you didn't have to send another application fee. I believe that changed, and then they made the distinction between undergraduate and graduate. That may have changed again, so check to see if you have to send in another fee if you've already applied to that university at a different point in time, or any state university. After you've got all your information in for graduate school, when should you contact them? Well, most of the time you're probably not going to hear anything from a PhD program until probably February. It could be January, depending on when the deadline was, but if the deadline's December, as you know, in December it's the end of a semester, and then you often have Christmas and New Year's holidays, and so you might not get a lot of movement on the applications until sometime in January. So I wouldn't recommend contacting programs until maybe the end of January. If you haven't heard anything from them by mid-February, I would recommend calling them and asking them about the status of your application. With master's programs, it's going to be later on, so it's probably more like May where you could contact them. Other issues regarding graduate school. What do you do if you get more than one offer? First off, go out and have a very good time. You should be very happy. You've got a couple of options, and that's great. That's really where you start to weigh the different pieces, and that can be location, that can be education, that can be money, that can be any host of things. So when I was applying for doctoral work, I got into both UF and University of Southern California, and they were two of my top programs, and so I kind of had to weigh which one I wanted to go to. And I very much liked University of Southern Cal's program, and the guy I had been working with would have been great. But it was a big trek. I would have been far away from my family, and for me that would have been a little bit tough. I'm close to my family, and I'm an only child, so I take care of a lot of things for them. Additionally, Southern Cal couldn't guarantee me as much money as UF could. Now, I had the opportunity to possibly get more money at Southern Cal, but Southern Cal was a private institution, cost a lot more, so I would have had to get a lot more from them, and since they couldn't guarantee it, that kind of set it over the top, and I wasn't willing to take that risk. So weigh the different factors and try and figure out which are most important to you. That's another time where if you have a mentor who's a professor, or if you wanted to talk with a professor who wrote one of your letters of rec, to kind of get their take on it, they may be able to give you some good insight and ideas to evaluate. When you get offers, usually they're going to be, you're probably going to get a phone call about it, but they'll also send you one in the mail. Don't feel like you have to take the first offer exactly when it happens. It's not uncommon to say something like, "Oh, I'm really excited. I thank you very much for the offer. I'm honored to be offered the position. I'm still considering a number of different variables. What's the deadline for me to let your program know?" And then they'll say, "Well, we need to know by March 1st or February 23rd or whatever kind of date they have." But don't feel like you have to tell them right there on the spot, yes or no. What if you don't get any offers? If you don't get any offers, if you've applied for PhD work, you might consider applying to master's programs. You may also consider the idea of, well, it's not really what I want to do, so let me go ahead and either look into getting a job. There's something called doing post-baccalaureate work, which means if you feel that your GPA isn't particularly high, or if you want to try and target specific courses to make your application more attractive, you can apply for post-baccalaureate work, which essentially means you have a degree and you're non-degree seeking, but you're looking to take a couple of courses in certain areas. That's an option. You can look to do some volunteer work. So don't feel like it's the end of the world. To be quite honest, my plan coming out of undergrad was to take a year off and then go back to grad school. I did that. I took a year off. I applied. I got into 2 of the 4 programs of interest, but I didn't really get into the one program I wanted, and so I said I'm not going to go. And I went ahead and tried to not only work, but look into what my options were, because my initial idea was very kind of limited. So you may want to look at other options. If you're only applying to PhD programs, you might consider PsyD programs. If you're only applying in certain areas of the country, you might look to other areas of the country. If you're only interested in counseling, you might consider counseling and clinical programs. So look at kind of other options that you have, or just look to reload and say, well, I really need to, bust my ass and try and do better on the GRE, or let me see if I can somehow get involved in research to get a better letter of rec. By the time you've completed your bachelor's degree, your GPA is relatively set. You can take a couple courses and get A's. It's not really going to raise your GPA very much, but you can do post-bac work to try and show that you are looking to get more information, more expertise in certain areas, and maybe to meet requirements for certain schools. You may also be able to take a graduate course or two as a post-baccalaureate student, and that may show that you can do master's level work. They usually won't let you take doctoral level courses post-bac, but there may be some master's courses post-bac that you can take. So that's another way to another thing to think about. As far as jobs go, you're going to want to again look at the field or fields of interest. Now, very often people are like, I just want to get a job, I want to start making some money and get paid, and there's nothing wrong with that perspective, but if you take the first job that comes around and it's not something you're particularly interested in, you may find yourself bouncing around a little bit from area to area. So with both jobs and graduate programs, I wouldn't recommend applying to things that you don't really want to do, or places that you really wouldn't go, because then you're kind of wasting your time. And for graduate school, you're wasting money because of the application. As far as jobs go, you don't really do a personal statement, but you will often do a cover letter, and we'll talk about that in the personal statement kind of portion, how cover letters are similar and yet different. But look for fields that are at least reasonably interesting to you. And again, if you're at a bit of a standstill, you're not really sure what area or areas you'd like to look into, go to the Occupational Outlook Handbook, go to some of the career inventories, some of which we've done and others they have at Career Services, and look to get ideas that way. My first job out of college was working in a juvenile prison, which I really hadn't considered until someone said you should really look into social services and the broad range of them. So not just counseling, because you can't really do that with a bachelor's degree, but what that job allowed me to do was work on a lot of kind of pre-counseling skills, because I really had to listen to what the inmates were saying. I had to kind of understand where they were coming from, and I got to work with them over time, which is a luxury you don't always get when you're seeing clients. So I was able to develop a certain amount of trust with some of them, and we could kind of help troubleshoot issues they had and work towards goals they had when they were getting released, and so on. So that'll be it for today and for this lecture, and I will talk with you guys later. Thanks.